Today, as part of the English section of the MYP Masterclass, more specifically everything concerning persuasive writing and persuasive techniques, we'll be looking at how to write a persuasive or argumentative essay. This is a very important skill to have, not only for your English class when they ask you to produce a piece of persuasive writing, but in general, especially in fields such as history, global politics, philosophy, where you're going to have to present an argument, present it with evidence, and oftentimes provide counter arguments. Now, overall, a persuasive essay, their intention is in the name. The intention of a persuasive essay is to persuade your audience of whatever opinion you're trying to defend. And you're going to do this by laying out your arguments and providing evidence for each of them. Now, there are two ways you can approach a persuasive essay. And the way to choose depends a lot on the type of arguments and counter arguments that you have thought about so far. You can go an introduction for an argument with a respective counter argument within the paragraph, a second counter argument with a counter argument within the paragraph, and a third argument with a counter argument within the same paragraph, and then your conclusion. Or alternatively, you can do your introduction, your paragraph for your first argument, a second paragraph where you give a counter argument, and then a third paragraph when you restate your argument and explain why that argument is more important or more valid than the counter argument you explored in the previous paragraph, and then your conclusion. So starting by the introduction. Your introduction will usually have a hook. You'll present the topic, give some context for the topic. This is very important. Your reader has to know what they're talking about. And present the thesis statement, the overall argument you're making. Now, the hook is optional, it's recommended, but you can go without it. A hook can be something like a rhetorical question, a statistic, a number, a thought experiment. For instance, in this introduction, lately, there has been a growing debate regarding whether or not kids should be allowed to have their phones in schools. Although phones have become a part of daily life, schools are becoming more and more concerned with the harm these can cause to the school's social environment and students' self-esteem, leading them to push for banning these during school hours. As extreme as the measure might seem, banning phones in schools is a big step to protect students' well-being. Here you can see how you have no hook, so a rhetorical question might improve this, but it's not necessary. The paragraph makes sense without it either way. You have your topic. What's the topic? Okay, so there's a growing concern about kids being allowed or not phones at school. You have the context, like what has been the case so far, what has happened, what has led to this discussion. Maybe it's an overview of the arguments that you will be presenting, and then your overall thesis. As extreme as the measure might seem, banning phones in school is a big step to protect students' well-being. Okay, so this essay is going to have a positive outlook towards banning phones. Now, as I mentioned, you can go for the first structure, which will give you argument, thesis, evidence, explanation, link, and conclusion, and then counter-argument, evidence, explanation, link, and conclusion, and then argument according to the overall argument you're defending in the essay. Or you could do structure two, which is argument, thesis, evidence, explanation, counter-argument, link, and conclusion, and just follow the same structure repetitively. Now, structure one. Use structure one when your counter-argument is not necessarily tied to the argument that you're making. For instance, if your argument is that schools should ban phones because it betters the social environment, and then your counter-argument is that parents will be concerned about being able to communicate with their kids during school hours. Now, those two, while they do work, they're not really in the same set of ideas. However, if your counter-argument would be that phones are currently a way to socialize, and it is important to the kids' socializing process to have the technology that they've grown up with, as they are often sharing reels or TikToks or doing things together whilst on their phones, and that is your counter-argument, then that is something you could include in the same paragraph. So it depends on how connected your argument and your counter-argument are going to be. So let's look at an example of structure one. One reason why schools should ban phones is to increase students' engagement with the classes. With the rise of phones, students have been shown have been shown more likely to be distracted by notifications or games during class time, leading to lower academic performance. Since 2016, standard math and reading scores have decreased steadily. However, in schools where the phone ban has been implemented, the scores have begun to increase once more. While not reaching the original outcomes, it does suggest a correlation between phone absent classes and improved performance. Indicative phone bans are the way to go in order to better students' development. Therefore, academic growth and improvement is one of the reasons schools should ban phones. Okay, so there you have a full argument. Perhaps it could be a bit more expanded, but the overall argument is there. And then the next paragraph would be a counter-argument. That said, many believe that it will limit parents' abilities to communicate with the students during school hours, as many parents rely on phones in order to reschedule pickups, appointments, or coordinating a younger sibling's afternoon. Banning them may be harmful to long-established family logistics. However, parents may coordinate this in the morning or make use of the school services in order to communicate with students in case of change in plans or emergency, making phones, though useful, unnecessary. So there you have a counter-argument. Of course, that's a very short paragraph that can be well expanded, but the idea is you have your counter-argument, your evidence for that counter-argument, and then an explanation where you're not only going to explain the evidence you just gave, but you're going to explain why it is not that valid or there is a solution to it that agrees with the overall argument that you're making. Or a structure 2 paragraph would look something like this. One reason why schools should ban phones to increase students' engagement with classes is to increase students' engagement with classes. With the rise of phones, students have been shown more likely to be distracted by notifications or games during class time, leading to lower academic performance. Since 2016, standard math, reading scores, it's the same as last. And then here's where it changes. You explain that, and then you would state your counter-argument. However, many claim that these score increases are not reliable as most standard testing fails to account for diverse teaching and learning styles, and that they do not suffice as proof of the effectiveness of limiting phone policies. Many other factors, such as changes in schools' methodology or staffing, could also be behind this result, discrediting the argument. That said, the results have been consistent across multiple schools in different districts, and the students themselves have stated that they felt better with their academic performance since the banning of phones, suggesting that in spite of the general doubt surrounding standard testing, the phone ban has been a significant factor in score improvements. My apologies. Here, you have the first part similar, you're stating your argument, but then instead of closing the paragraph, you will present a counter-argument directly linked to the argument that you presented. Explain, give some evidence for that counter-argument you're presenting, and stating why that does not necessarily mean that the counter-argument is right, where your overall argument, your main argument, is still stronger. In this case, that is achieved through stating that the students themselves have felt better about it, and that the results have been consistent regardless of location, which broadens the scope of the studies and the evidence that you've provided. In this structure, you'll just do like 3 more paragraphs like that. In the previous structure, the idea is that after your counter-argument, the next paragraph will restate your overall argument with a different set of arguments. And lastly, your conclusion. Summarize the points you've presented and restate your argument. That's all a conclusion needs to be. If you want, you can do a broader reflection about something else. The example does not include this, but you could also reflect on a larger problem you're seeing in educational tendencies, for instance, or in adapting to modern technological times. In conclusion, although there are valid concerns regarding parent-student communication throughout the day and the reliability of the measures to support the academic improvements, the general tendency for increased academic outcomes, student well-being, and school social environment prove that the benefits of phone bans far exceed the concerns regarding it. Given such, phone bans are a measure that all schools seeking to further the protection and development of their students should implement. Now, the examples are not the best ones, they're not as developed as you have the ability to make them, but the idea is to give you a sense of the structure that you should be using and that you should be thinking in when you're writing persuasive essays. Thank you for joining us in another episode of the MYP Masterclass.